Hey guys, it's Daniel. Welcome back.
The following is from Jim Morrison, Life Death Legend by Stephen Davis. I have a lot of Doors and specifically Jim Morrison videos on my channel. If you want to help me make more videos, the best way to do so is to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Quote, September 17th, 1967. 15 years before MTV, Ed Sullivan's Sunday night variety show was the only live broadcast venue for popular music, all other such shows being pre-taped. Ed Sullivan had launched Elvis Presley's national career in 1956 and done the same for the Beatles in '64. 9 months earlier, in January 1967, the puritanical Sullivan had successfully censored the Rolling Stones, forcing Mick Jagger to change the lyrics "Let's Spend the Night Together" to "Let's Spend Some Time Together." Ed Sullivan was able to do this. The Doors were reminded by their newly hired publicist Derek Taylor, a suave Londoner who'd worked with the Beatles because he had the only live gig on television that could pull in up to 70 million viewers. Any act that crossed Sullivan was never booked on the show again. The Doors agreed to do the Ed Sullivan Show, but only if their own guys, Rothschild and Botnick, could run the soundboard during the two songs. Ed Sullivan met the Lizard King. Sullivan met Jim Morrison that Sunday afternoon when Ed dropped by the band's dressing room after rehearsal. The band was laughing at Robby, who was doing his Three Stooges imitation, running in a circle while lying on the floor. Sullivan looked at them for a moment and said, according to Densmore, "You boys look great when you smile. Do that tonight. You're too serious." Then, Ed moved down the hall to see the other acts on the program that night. Yul Brynner, Steve and Heidi, Rodney Dangerfield, the Skating Epsteins. The Doors were still goofing on Sullivan's famous uptightness when his son-in-law, Bob Precht, the show's producer, knocked and walked in. Precht had successfully forced the great Mick Jagger to censor himself, and now he targeted Jim Morrison, explaining in a genial manner that the phrase, "girl, you couldn't get much higher," would be seen as a drug reference and would get them in trouble with Standards and Practices, the CBS network censor. Precht told Jim that he couldn't say higher on network television, and asked Jim to change the lyric for the broadcast. "F you," Jim murmured. Shocked silence. "What did you say?" Precht responded. "Jim, what do you want to change it to?" After some embarrassed glances between the band over some of Precht's suggestions, Ray Manzarek assured him that they would cooperate. They couldn't believe this lame BS. Jim was angry as he changed into a Byronic white shirt and his leather suit, threatening to substitute "Let's Spend the Night Together" or just start cursing a blue streak during the broadcast. No one knew what would happen, least of all the other Doors. Of course, no one felt they could talk to Jim about something like this. "We all sensed rage," Densmore later wrote, "and a possible explosion too near the surface to mess with in dealing with Jim." Ed Sullivan introduced the Doors with his lip curling slightly in evident distaste. The Doors performed People Are Strange during the show's first segment, with Jim looking unusually dead-eyed and struggling to sing in tune. Few singers could risk looking as drunk and dissolute as Jim did on that broadcast, and the cuffs of his white shirt were soiled. In the last segment, they did their soloist version of Light My Fire, and of course, Jim sang the word higher twice. Not with any unusual emphasis, but exactly the way he'd sung it 100 times before. At the finale, hot and sweaty under the blazing TV lights, Ray called out to him, "Come on," and Jim made eye contact with the camera and really let loose, sending Morrison's scream energy out to a middle America unprepared to hear anything so painfully acute. As the song crashed to a halt, there were screams and applause from the audience, and Jim assumed his most Marlene-esque pose with his legs crossed and the mic held behind his shoulders, like a javelin about to be thrown. Grim-faced Ed Sullivan, who had famously shaken hands with Elvis, the Beatles, and the Stones, stayed at the side of the stage and applauded mildly. An angry Bob Precht whined about the Doors breaking their promise to him. Ray told him it was an accident, that Jim, in the excitement of being on Ed Sullivan, had simply forgotten. "We were going to book you for 6 more shows, Precht told them. "Mr. Sullivan liked you boys. 6 more shows. You know what that would have done for your career?" Jim didn't care. "Hey man," he said, stopping Precht with a glare. "So what?" "We just did, Ed Sullivan." Indeed, Jim Morrison's performance had been the sexiest, most provocative thing on American television since Elvis Presley's debut on Sullivan's show 11 years earlier. It was a deliberate provocation, like yelling fire in a crowded country. And there's little doubt that, wherever he was, in Memphis or Los Angeles, Elvis Presley also watched Jim Morrison's leather-clad Sunday night broadcast. A year later, making his own legendary 1968 television comeback, Elvis wore a leather suit that was a close copy of what Jim had worn that night. The Doors never appeared on Ed Sullivan's show again.